Hey friends, this is the Mrs. Wolfie from our half-acre homestead with part 3 of our simple tied log cabin quilt. Okay folks, here's our quilt top, and as you can see it's really huge. It goes all the way over here, and under it I have my batting, which is supposed to be queen size, and I have a king size flannel sheet, which is too short. So we'll trim it all up in the end, but for now, let's get pinning. Here is the center. One of the things I love about this quilt is you always know where center is. Here are my safety pins. Now, as always, I only have so many of these nice big ones. So I'm just going to pin until I feel the table underneath, because this is a really big quilt and I want to make sure that I go all the way through with my pins. I pin the table surface and then I can move it backward or forward, but it'll always hold on center. So I'm just going to put a pin every 8 to 12 inches across the center and work my way back. Okay folks, what you don't see here is this is one end, and I have pinned almost the whole quilt just in spots to keep it from shifting while I'm rolling it on the table. And here it is rolled up. So now we're going to start tying it. This is just a little bit different from the last one that I tied for y'all, but because I'm tying it in two colors, because obviously we have lights and we have darks. So I've picked brown and off-white. We're going to start at this end. Now, I have a king size sheet on the back of this and queen size batting, and I still may have to trim this all the way around. So don't panic if you see me cutting away part of the edges of this quilt. Okay, you need a nice sharp darning needle. Don't try and do this with a dull one, folks. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this. Now folks, it's not because I don't know how to quilt. For those of you who are new, it is because I don't have any room right now for my quilt frame until Papa finishes the new living room. So my table is my quilt frame. And you know what? Not everybody has a quilt frame, folks. So this is a huge quilt, and normally I would double the thread, but I think I'm going to keep it single. And all we do, and all these little threads will get trimmed later, is for every long strip here and here and here, I'm going to put 2 ties. And as they get shorter, I'll just do 2 and then maybe 1. So it's real simple. You dig in, make sure you get through, and you pull it up, and we just tie and tie a knot, and Bob's your uncle. There's the first part of the quilting done. And as for a little history lesson, a lot of times people didn't have room, like me, did not have room in their houses for quilt frames. So they would tie them. Frames sometimes are just 4 8-foot 1x2s and 4 seat clamps. And yes, folks, I have done it. I was just telling Nan here how the first time I did quilts, I tied them just like this. And then the first time I wanted to quilt one, I did a small one for Briar. And I used a big hoop, like on a big embroidery hoop. You've seen me do that with Cordelia's quilt. And then I would use I graduated to 4 8-foot 1x2s or 1x3s if you want more stability. And I just seat clamped them at the corners, and I tacked my quilt all across the bottom and all across the sides and all across the frame. I tacked it all to the frame, and I would quilt a row and then I would untack the ends on either side, and I would roll it, and then I would continue to quilt. And that thing sat on, one end sat on my table and the other sat on 2 chairs.
Wow.
Yeah. That's the quilt I did for the pig roast. That's how I did that one.
Oh.
In that little wee house in Colburn.
Oh my God.
And then I kind of designed a, you know, a rough one that Howie made me out of 2x4s. And I used 1x2 strapping as the top and bottom of the frame. And it fit into a set of legs. The top part did and the bottom part did. And whenever I wanted to turn it, I just pulled the 1x2 out of the frame, pulled it out of the 2x4 frame, and rolled it. And then I have the one I have now, which is it's getting pretty rough, folks. It's busted in a couple of places. So it may have to be replaced. So you don't have to have all the fancy equipment to start quilting. You really don't. You just have to have an idea of how you're going to do it. And go from there. Okay, I've got the first 2 rows almost tied, and as you can see, the brown and the white follow the pattern. Now, I am cutting the edges off. The sides, I'm not going to lose any of this quilt, but I am trimming the top and the bottom, and I'm going to lose about a whole block, but it's going to be even. So, it'll be nice. Okay, so as you can see here, the quilt is half tied. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it around and roll up the other side so that I can unroll the other side and start working on it tomorrow. And there you have it. It's ready for me to start working on tomorrow. Okay. Now the quilt top is done, tied, trimmed, all that stuff. The quilt is assembled. Now we have to do the binding. And I've chosen this fabric because it's one of the fabrics I used in the quilt, but it's also the one that I have the most of left because I don't know actually how much I'm going to need. Now I want to cut these really as long as possible. You want them to be fairly precise, but this is our binding, so it's going to be folded, ironed, sewn on, and then folded over and sewn again. So 3 inches good, because once it's folded in half and then folded over the edge of the quilt again, you're going to get about 3/4 of an inch of a binding. Okay, so here are our strips, and you're going to take them and you're going to, and they're really long, but don't be daunted, you want them long. And you're going to take right sides of work facing, which means the clearest, sharpest side, and you're going to put them together. And you're going to make sure that your ends are square because you want your strips to be lined up against each other. And we're just going to sew it straight across. So that we now have a longer strip of fabric. And there is the seam, okay? Okay, I've said it before and I'll say it again, folks. If you don't think you need an iron in your life, don't take up quilting. All right, so here we have my strips, and they're all sewn together in approximately 9 yards, which is because I've trimmed my quilt around the outside. This should work. We are going to fold this in half, lengthwise, with the wrong sides facing each other. And we're just going to press this down. And I'm going to put my first, you can pin it, but cardboard's a bitch to pin too. So we're going to take our piece of cardboard, we're going to roll up the ironed part, section of our binding, and we're just going to continue to iron and roll it up. Here is our finished quilt. Now what we want to do is we want to put the binding on. And I will probably tell this story every quilt I do. I was horrible at bindings. And I learned from 2 different people how to do a binding. My friend Helen, God love you, Helen. It was one of those slap your forehead moments, because I would fold fabric around here and try and stitch all the way through. And my friend, my cousin Laura's mom showed me how to do invisible stitching. We're going to take our binding and you're going to leave a tail of about, I don't know, 3-4 inches. And you're going to put the raw edge, the edge that isn't folded, this edge, along the back of your quilt. And we're going to pin the raw edge of the binding to the raw edge of the quilt from behind. And pin it in place, making sure that you're pinning through all 3 layers. And as we go, we're just going to unroll it from our cardboard piece that is holding our binding all in place. All right, so when I have this all pinned on and ready to be sewn, we'll be back. Okay, I'm just about done pinning this all on, but here's something I want to show you. Remember that extra bit I told you to leave on the end? That's this here, so that we could go around the corner. And all I do for the corner is I just pinch it up and then go around the corner. What I want to show you is the easiest way to connect these 2 pieces. So what we're going to do to attach these 2 so that we can continue to sew in a seamless way, sort of seamless way, we're going to open the end here. We're going to make a cuff. And if you want to either pin it in place or iron it, that's fine. But I'm just making the cuff, and then I'm bringing this piece over, and I'm just laying it down crease to crease and folding this back up and just pin that in place. And now we can sew. Okay, our binding has all been sewn on, and now we're going to flip the quilt over. And I'm going to show you how to invisible stitch the binding to the front. Okay, now let's start with the corner, okay? Because that's the fussy part. Now, as you can see, it is sewn to the front of the quilt, and we've gone through all the layers. And now we're just going to fold our binding over. And starting before the corner, now, I have doubled my thread. A lot of people don't, but I have not put a knot on it. And what I'm going to do is, let me get you a little closer here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the quilt at the front, and I'm going to come up through the binding, and I'm going to pull, and I'm just going to take the thread. I'm going to trim the end off nice and even. And I'm just going to give that just a gentle tug until that tail end disappears. You don't want to pull it out. You don't want to pull it all the way through. And then I'm just going to stitch through where I came out a couple of times to anchor it into place. So we're going to go back through the spot underneath where your first stitch is. And we're going to go between the layers of the quilt. It's not going to show through on the back. Your needle's not going to show through on the back. And it's going through the batting basically and up to your next spot so that the line or the stitch in between these 2 spots is hidden in the batting. So we're going to go back through that stitch right where it came out. It came out on the binding, but we're going to go back through the quilt top to the next spot. and pull. Once you get the hang of this, it's really simple. So we'll go down through where the stitch came out, into the quilt top, and through the batting and back up through the binding. You don't see any stitches on the back, and you can barely see the stitches on the front. Let me do a close-up one for you. It's come up through the binding. We're going to go through the quilt just below the binding where the stitch came out, and we're going to come up next to and there it is, almost invisible. Well, there it is, folks. The log cabin tied quilt is done, and I can't say I'm not pleased. I'm really pleased. And I think I'll give it away. Who should we give it to, folks? John! Oh, my goodness. This is me and my little brother. And we are finally here in Ohio. Mwah.
You make me feel all funny.
Take care. Bye-bye.